Citizens Oversight Committee, CIRM's board, signing in from all over the world, it looks like. So thank you all for, thank you, Judy. Thank you all for giving up the time this morning. We have an interesting agenda, and I'm going to ask Scott to kick off the meeting by calling our roll.
Dan Bernal. Maria Bonneville.
Present.
Judy Chow.
Present.
Leandra Clark Harvey. Anne-Marie DeLiege. Anne-Marie? I see a thumbs up. That'll work. Thank you. Isabel Derone.
Present.
Mark Fisher Colbury.
Here.
Fred Fisher.
Present.
Elena Flowers.
Present.
David Higgins.
Here.
Vito Bassiani.
Here.
Rich Lahara.
Present.
Chris Miaskowski. Lauren Miller-Rogan.
Here.
Adriana Padilla.
Here.
Joe Panetta.
Here.
Marv Southard.
Here.
Carol Watson. Kevin Zhu.
Here.
Thank you.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum.
This is good. Thank you very much. The main order of business today is item number 3 on the agenda, the consideration of the applications that have been submitted in response to our new discovery program, the DISC 4, otherwise known as the Remind program. And to present the formal presentation, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Gilsombrano.
Okay, thank you very much. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to give you an overview on the Remind L program and the recommendations from the Grants Working Group related to applications submitted to this opportunity. So we are here, and CIRM exists to accelerate world-class science to deliver transformative regenerative medicine treatments in an equitable manner to a diverse Californian world. The Remind program overall is one mechanism by which we try to achieve this mission. I'll tell you a bit about the broader program itself and then go into the Remind L. The Remind initiative is a new mechanism that we began that stands for Research Using Multidisciplinary Innovative Approaches in Neuro Diseases. And it is a mechanism that has a couple of different flavors that I'll take you through. More specifically, we're starting and launching this Remind initiative with accelerating the discovery of mechanisms, in particular for neuropsychiatric disorders, with the goal of identifying, validating potential novel targets and biomarkers that could lead to translational studies and perhaps even clinical studies down the line. So these awards generally are structured to support early stage discovery work to accelerate foundational scientific understanding of disease mechanisms and potentially develop tools and technologies that can aid us in that. But also to bring together multidisciplinary innovative approaches, meaning multiple players, multiple laboratories and PIs together in these efforts, and to drive open and collaborative science through data, resource, and knowledge sharing. So as mentioned, there are 2 types of programs under the overall Remind mechanism. There's the Remind L, which are the large collaborative projects with a duration of about 4 years. They are provided a budget of 8 to 10 million. And the goal here is to bring together a minimum of 5 investigators to do collaborative work on a given effort. We have a target number of 6 awards that we'd like to issue under this first Remind L program. The Remind X is a different type of opportunity. These are exploratory high-risk projects. The duration is 2 years, and the maximum budget is 1 million. So these are more akin to a seed type of award. But nevertheless, it still is promoting collaboration by requiring a minimum of 2 investigators. And there we would expect to have more awards, and I think the original proposal was to target 12 once we get that program going. So just coming back then to the Remind L, that's the applications we are dealing with today. Remind L awards are going to support expansive cross-disciplinary and integrated studies led by large collaborative teams applying a range of technologies and approaches. So there are several outcomes that may be proposed through these types of applications. It could be discovery of novel mechanistic insights or furthering our current understanding of neuropsychiatric mechanisms, addressing major bottlenecks in the study of neuropsychiatric disorders, expanding understanding of disease mechanisms to diverse human populations, and identifying and validating new therapeutic hypotheses, targets, and/or biomarkers. So that's sort of the general universe of what may be proposed. But there are some requirements under Remind L. They must all address a key knowledge gap or research bottleneck in our understanding of neuropsychiatric diseases. They must include studies that employ stem cells or genetic research as part of the central approach or hypothesis, and they must justify any proposed use of non-human models and validate the findings using human tissue or models. Some additional features, some of these I've already mentioned, but I just want to focus in on the team of investigators. There's a minimum effort required for the participation of the 5 collaborating investigators, with 15% for the PI and 10% each for the other co-investigators. There's also a requirement to have at least one of the members of the team have relevant clinical expertise to bring that perspective into the consideration of the studies that they are conducting, with the hope that these will eventually become work that can be translated or even reach clinical study. Another member has to have relevant computational biology expertise and also have a data project manager as part of the team to help coordinate the data management and collection and the sharing of that data. Matching funds, so just briefly, matching funds are something that are allowed under this program in order to increase the amount of funding they receive from CIRM. So for additional funds of up to $500,000 per year can be requested if the applicant provides equal or larger amount of matching funds as part of their award. And so there are some that did take advantage of this to increase their overall award amount, knowing that they are going to contribute matching funds. And there are specific requirements and eligible expenses that are related to this that I won't go into at the moment. So that's the program itself. The grants working group was tasked with reviewing the applications that came in response to this Remind L initiative. The composition of the working group that was put together for this included scientific grants working group members that serve on the panel to provide the scientific evaluation and provide scientific scores on all applications. There are our board members who are patient advocate and nurse members from the ICOC who provide the patient perspective on DEI, significance and potential impact, and also oversight on the review process itself. And they often provide a suggested scientific score. We also have scientific specialists. These are non-voting ad hoc members who may contribute to one or two of the applications when needed to bring in specialized expertise. The scoring of the Remind applications used the method of 1, 2, or 3, with the score of 1 being exceptional merit and warranting funding. A score of 2 means it needs improvement and doesn't warrant funding, but could be resubmitted. And I'll provide more detail on that in just a second. Or a score of 3 if it's sufficiently flawed and does not warrant funding. The score are based on these overall questions or criteria. Does the project hold the necessary significance and potential for impact? Here we also want to stress innovation. So is the proposal innovative? Does it have a good rationale? Is it well planned and designed? Is it feasible, including having an appropriate team and all the resources that are needed to accomplish the goals? And does the project uphold the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion? So this table summarizes the outcomes of the grants working group review and their recommendations. We had 26 applications that were reviewed. That was a pretty high number, and we didn't expect such a large number, but we got it. So it proved to be a popular opportunity. There were 5 applications that earned a score of 1. And so those 5 total to 67.5 or so million. The funds that we have available in order to fund applications is 88.2. So those 5 are certainly within the funds available. There are 9 applications that received a score of 2. The total request out of those 9 would be 112.2 million. And then there were 12 that received a score of 3. With all our reviews and under Prop 14, any application that is not recommended for funding by the Grants Working Group, but which has 35% or more of the members score to fund the application, needs to include a minority report. And the minority report really is a summary that's of the opinion of those that scored in favor of funding that's included within the overall review summary itself. So it's just meant to highlight the points from that group to the extent that we are able to put that together. And so in order to qualify, then you have to have 35% of the members score a 1. And there was one application that met those criteria and qualified for a minority report, which was the 16337. It had or received a score of 1 from 7 members and a score of 2 from 7 other members. By default, an absence of a majority results in a score of 2. And so that's why it received a score of 2. The team, in terms of its own recommendation regarding this application, supports the score of 2, which is to not fund but allow the applicants to revise and resubmit this application. As mentioned before, there were actually a total of 9 applications, including the one that qualified for a minority report that received a score of 2. And so the score of 2 allows resubmission if 2 conditions are met. One, that the target number of applications, in this case 6, is not reached. We had 5, so we were 1 under the goal. And the Application Review Subcommittee agrees to consider additional applications for funding. So the Application Review Subcommittee can choose to go with just 5, or you can choose to have those that are a 2 revise and resubmit to get additional applications. Now, the caveat is that the remaining budget is going to allow for 1 additional application, possibly 2, only if the applicants reduce their requested budget when they resubmit. So depending on the extent to which that happens, if it happens, we're looking at 1, maybe 2 applications at best. So given all of that, the CIRM team recommendation as it relates to these applications is for the Application Review Subcommittee to approve funding for the 5 applications that received a score of 1, to not approve funding for all the applications that received a score of 3. So those are all the ones that did not have merit, and to allow for revision and resubmission of applications that received a score of 2. So that would be the 9 applications. This slide is just to show you the board members that have indicated a conflict of interest with DISC 4 applications. So please be mindful of that in terms of discussion and voting. I am sure Scott and Claudette will remind you if there is any incursion on that. Let me share something else. I want to share with you the spreadsheet that shows the rank order before we go into discussion. So give me 1 second. All right. So here you can see the 5 applications that received a score of 1 and the relative number of votes that it received from the working group members. So those are the recommended ones. Below that are the 9 applications that we recommend revise and resubmit. So those are the 9 that include the one with a minority report, and below that are those that scored a 3. So I will leave this up there, and Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Gil, for your presentation. I'm going to ask for a comment first from our from Scott Tosher, if you would.
Thank you, Vito. Because, as Gil alluded, the budget of all pending applications exceeds the program budget authorized for this RFA by the ICOC. For now, I would ask members Duron and Flowers to refrain from making or seconding any motions or speaking at this time regarding applications until such time as their conflicted applications have been dispensed with. You're still a critical component of the final votes, and I'll have further instruction on how you can phrase that at the appropriate time. Thank you, Vito.
Thank you, Scott. So the chair would like to entertain a motion to accept the recommendations of our grants review team.
Second.
Mark
Second.
Fisher Colby.
I hear seconds, I don't hear the motion.
Mark made
the motion, thank you.
Seconded
Mark.
by David.
And seconded by David Higgins, thank you. So we can commence with discussion on the motion to accept the recommendations of the grant review team with comments from board members first. I'm not seeing the gallery view. I'm sorry, Claudette. Is there a way to?
There are currently no hands raised.
Ah. Asking the board members once again if there's any comment on the motion, which would be to fund the 5 in tier 1, not to fund the 6 in tier 3, and to allow reconsideration of the 9 in tier 2.
So, and this is Anne-Marie. Actually, I do have a comment, but because I'm doing this via my cell phone, right now I don't see how to raise my hands on the traditional way. Can I ask a question about this?
Absolutely, Anne-Marie, it's yours.
Okay, so this question is not about the first 5 applications, but right now what we're saying with this motion is that we do not recommend to fund tier 2. Is that correct?
That's correct, with the proviso that they are allowed to be reconsidered, resubmitted for reconsideration.
So a question for anyone, particularly for Gil, there is the, I'll call it a problematic application, but maybe problematic is not the right word, of 337. And I think we have the opportunity to review the application as well as the letters submitted by the team. As I look at the scores, this one differs from any other application in a sense that the score of 7 and 7 is not quite as high by far as the first 5, On the other hand, it's also better than the other applications below, which have a vast majority of scores of 2. And the applicants made the comment that not 15 members could vote, 7-7, what's going on? It's a bit unfair. Gil or anyone else, could you provide a perspective on this? Please.
Sure, I'm happy to if that's all right.
Yes, Gil, please, go ahead.
So, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there were a total of 14 members that provided a score, and so as everyone recognizes, there are 15 members on the panel. There are cases for some of the applications, and you may see it for a couple of others, where you have 1 or 2 fewer votes because of a conflict. So those that are conflicted can't, or if they did not, for some reason, participate in the review of that application. A score of 7 versus 7, based on the scoring method that we have, by default goes to a score of 2, rather than upgrading it to a score of 1. And the reason we do that is because, at least from our perspective, if there is no majority, then it is best to have the applicants address concerns and resubmit. Given that there is enough concern out of those 7 that scored a 2, that in our view would warrant at least addressing those comments in some form. And just more broadly, in terms of how that application compares to the other 8 that received a score of 2, we looked at all of those carefully to determine, is it worth that the CIRM team recommend the application with a minority report, or perhaps any of the others. And we felt that it was important to give all of them an opportunity to revise, because they all have fixable elements that could be addressed. And many of these have promising approaches and innovative methods that they have included in the application that may be worthwhile. So from our perspective, we thought it might be most fair to give all of them the opportunity to address the concerns of the grants working group and have them look at it again in order to determine what then moves forward.
Marvin
I
Southern.
appreciate.
Oh, Anne-Marie, you want to follow up?
Yeah, appreciate this perspective, Gil. It all makes sense. And again, these are sort of rules that you have applied across the board and over time. In some way, however, I could see a perspective saying it's a bit unfair in a sense that one reviewer was missing for good reasons. Had these reviewers, scored 1, it would be a slight majority, but this would have moved the application in the first tier. And in that case, it
Correct.
differs from the others. Is that right?
Yeah, but since we really don't know what that 15th reviewer would have scored, it could have easily been a 2 as well.
The challenge that I see here, and I would welcome comments from my colleagues, is that there's room for 1 more only out of the, I believe, 9 applications that are invited to revise and resubmit.
Correct.
Is it going to be on a deadline basis, or the first one who has the time and is prompt to resubmit and improve their score will then be the winner? How is the process going to take place?
Right. So the process is the same as we've used for our other infrastructure programs, where we will schedule and hold another review. Every applicant that received a score of 2 is going to receive instructions for how to submit their revision. So this is a revision. It's not starting over. They will be asked to address the concerns. And so these will all go to basically the same panel of reviewers to look at again and determine if the concerns have been addressed, and then they will issue another score based on that and discussion that they have at a scheduled meeting.
Okay. When do you anticipate that will happen? 3 months?
So yeah, so we anticipate providing a couple of months for applicants to revise their applications and submit them, and then 2 to 3 months beyond that before it comes to the board again.
Well, thank you, Gil. Your responses have been very helpful to me. I can say that there's nothing unfair in what you have explained to me. I can understand certainly the frustration of the applicants, but there's no flaw to the process that has been applied by the CERM team. So thank you. I welcome any other comment.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I think Marvin Southard is next.
I would support funding that additional application, mostly in the cause of efficiency. You know, there would be a lot of people doing a lot of work for chasing this, and it's likely that one would win. So I would say let's be efficient and fund it now.
Anyone else? Thank you.
Adriana Padilla.
Thank you, Marvin. Adriana Padilla is next.
Yeah, thank you. Is this the only opportunity to apply, or is this going to be an ongoing application process for those in the score 2 category? So say, for instance, it's going to be another call for applications down the road in another year. Besides
Right,
revision.
yes, that's a good question. So there would be the revision if you vote in favor of having them revised. But in terms of additional opportunities, the Remind program will come back again. However, it may not be focused on neuropsychiatric diseases. So it will likely not have the same emphasis, meaning that the structure of the program with this focus may not come back, but it will likely be inclusive. I think the goal is to make it broader, but you know, it's not going to be quite exactly the same.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gil and Adriana. Fred Fisher.
Yeah, so if for board members that have not been part of a review process, they may not have an appreciation for how much effort actually goes into these reviews. I know Marv understands this quite well. And I think for us to disregard the concerns of half of the reviewers would be not only a departure from our regular practice, but really an insult to the time and effort that those reviewers spent actually outlining their concerns and doing so in a way that the applicant can easily respond to. It's not a new application, it's simply responding to the concerns. And with so many of the reviewers agreeing that this needs to come back with some issues addressed, I don't think we want to be funding proposals where half the review committee says, yeah, don't fund it. Now let them come back and respond to these issues. So I think we ought to stick to our practice. We ought to stick to the recommendation of the CERM team, and we ought to respect the efforts of the reviewers who are experts in the field, who thought enough of this proposal to warrant it a 2 rather than a 3. But we ought to not simply ignore their concerns and move forward with funding without addressing the concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. I'm going to ask Joe Panetta, and he'll be followed by David Higgins. Joe?
Thanks, Peter. I think Mark just pretty much said it all for me. The only other thing that I would add is that we might possibly split the way that we make a motion on this and maybe move to pass the first group and then take a separate vote on the second group, if that makes sense, because maybe there are varying opinions about that 50-50 split in the vote on that application. But yeah, I in all the time that I've been on this committee, I can't remember, maybe there's some examples, but I can't remember when we've approved an application that's had that kind of a split in the vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. David?
Just a quick question, really. We've had this conversation here about the numbers, the 1, 2, 3 scoring system for these various grants. Has any consideration been given to the content of the grants? That like one is particularly more, we being folks at CIRM understand what's important in the field, and therefore we might bias our grant process to those that are developing certain technologies or scientific questions. I don't think we do, and maybe there's no mechanism to do that, but I just wanted to clarify that.
A question for Gil?
A question for Gil. Thank you.
Well, if I understand your question, I mean, we did look at all of these applications that scored a 2 with the question of, do these have value? Are they promising? And we felt that there are many within that group that hold promise. And again, many of them have concerns from the grants working group that are addressable. And so we felt, rather than trying to choose one, that it would be better for the applicants to present their case to the grants working group and have them determine what they feel is most meritorious.
Thank you.
Thank you, David and Gil. Any other board members want to comment on the motion? If not, and I can come back to you if you have a subsequent thought, I'm going to ask if there's any member of the public that would like to comment on the motion.
There are 5 hands raised.
There are 5 hands raised. I'm going to ask Claudette to monitor this.
Okay. So everyone with their hands raised, you do have 3 minutes each. We will keep a timer. You will be able to see this timer on the top corner of your Zoom meeting room. When your time is up, we will mute you. So please make sure to pay attention to the time. We're starting with Dr. Baduri, and it will be followed by Dr. Colanzo. So Dr. Baduri, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for the opportunity, and I really appreciate the emphasis and focus from CIRM on funding grants related to neuropsychiatric diseases, which are an important challenge in our community and in California. I'm writing as the contact PI on application 16337, and I believe that we have been subjected to an unfair decision process. And I think that this interacts with a lot of the comments that have been discussed in the meeting as well. So I will try to keep this brief. But I think the argument that 7 votes are being ignored for tier 2 also ignores the fact that 7 votes for tier 1 are being ignored. In baseball, a tie goes to the runner, and in football, a tie goes to the receiver. And so we feel that the automatic classification to tier 2 is a bit arbitrary. I would like to second some of the points made by Marvin Southard that efficiency in this process is really important, both for the urgency of the problem and for the resources of the state of California. Additionally, The comments that were highlighted in the minority report and in our application specifically highlighted the innovative hypothesis and the strength of the application team that drove the recommendation, which is something that Gil really nicely outlined as a key focus of this Remind program. They also highlighted that they were very enthusiastic about the proposal and that altered metabolism via dietary interventions can impact development in neuropsychiatric diseases. And more on the specific scientific content will be highlighted by my other team members, but we think that this is a really exciting potential non-invasive treatment. Having listened to the recent STORM board discussions with great attention, we realize your desire to respect the process and the recommendations of the STORM staff. And so we would like to propose an alternative because we feel it's unfair, as has been highlighted by others on this call, including and Marie, that the categorization of our proposal in the same priority classification as the remaining tier 2 applications is unfair, given that the closest only has 2 votes. However, the constructive and fully addressable criticisms offered by the reviewers were helpful, and we would propose a limited revision where only a handful, specifically our application, would be offered a revision opportunity, and we would be happy to work with the program officers to discuss these concerns, which could address both the efficiency of the process, the urgency of the problem, and the concerns of the working group regarding the comments from the reviewers that gave it a tier 2 classification. We feel that this would be the most comprehensive and fair process that would allow us to balance the concerns of the reviewers, the content of our scientific proposal and its innovation, as well as the efficiency and taxpayer money that would otherwise be spent on this process. Thank you for the time and for the opportunity, and thank you to all of the reviewers who were able to give us feedback on our proposal. We're really excited about the science and hope that we can translate this to the clinic very soon.
Well, thank you, Dr. Baduri.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baduri. Next, we have Dr. Kornblum to be followed by Dr. Couch. Dr. Kornblum, you have the floor. 3 minutes.
Good morning. I'll read my statement for efficiency's sake. My name is Harley Kornblum. I'm a board-certified pediatric neurologist, the director of the UCLA Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Research Center, and a collaborator on the Baduri Remind L grant application. I'm speaking on behalf of my patients, their families, and my own family. In my clinical practice, I frequently see children with neurodevelopmental and neuropsychiatric disorders. My first research efforts were in the field of basic developmental neuroscience. However, a few events directed me towards translational study of autistic spectrum disorder. First, my lab was intimately involved in the discovery that a gene called PTEN plays a critical role in neural development and neural stem cells. Mutations in this gene and the pathway that it regulates was later shown to cause autistic spectrum disorders and focal epilepsies, both disorders that I treat as a clinician. Second, my nephew Avi had a severe autistic regression at the age of 2, going from a bright, talkative child to an individual that could not communicate with the outer world. This broke our hearts and steeled my resolve to contribute by whatever means to improving the lives of autistic children. A recent part of this effort is to investigate how PTEN influences neurodevelopment through its effects on metabolism. Why is this type of approach important? It's because metabolism is targetable not only by medication, but also by diet. In our clinical practice, we have been using diet and nutrient interventions for a number of neurodevelopmental disorders. Some of these disorders, called inborn errors of metabolism, require diets that lack or substitute certain nutrients. Diets that quite literally keep children alive and functioning. Epilepsy, one of the most common childhood neurological disorders, can also be targeted by diet, including the ketogenic diet, with which a number of my patients have been treated. Our Remind proposal examines the role of metabolism in the development and potential treatment of 2 categories of disorders that are founded in neurodevelopment: autistic spectrum disorder and schizophrenia. Despite amazing advances in understanding the genetic underpinning of these disorders, treatment options are unsatisfactory, to say the least. The concept that dietary interventions could be used to treat or even prevent these syndromes is more than a little exciting to me. Could dietary therapies be used to allow children and adults with autism and schizophrenia to lead more fulfilling, enriched lives? Our proposal is a first step towards these goals. It uses rigorous science and state-of-the-art models to establish how metabolism influences brain development, what roles it plays in the development of these disorders, and whether dietary modulation can be used to influence these processes. New approaches are urgently needed. Please allow us the opportunity to take these first steps.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kornblum. Okay. And then next up, we have Dr. Crouch to be followed by Dr. Quadrado. Dr. Crouch, you have the floor.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Betsy Crouch, and I'm a PI also on the 337 application. I'm a board-certified pediatrician and a neonatologist. I am also a vascular biologist and a neuroscientist at the University of California, San Francisco. Clinically, I work primarily in the neonatal intensive care unit, taking care of premature babies and other babies who have health challenges. To take a historical approach, in the 1960s, First Lady Jackie Kennedy gave birth to Patrick Kennedy, who died 2 days later due to complications of prematurity. This tragedy inspired much research and indeed was a major factor in the creation of NICHD. Now, as evidence of our progress, Patrick Kennedy had a 90% chance of dying at his birth weight and gestational age in 1963. Today, he would have over a 95% chance of surviving. Our premature babies can now survive when born extremely early, just over halfway through the typical pregnancy. But we know that survival is not the whole story. All premature babies, and especially the youngest one, carry a high risk of neurological and mental health problems. According to a 2023 publication, prematurely born children have a 30% higher risk of autism spectrum disorders than those who are born full term. And of course, ASD is one of the focus of our proposal. In addition, babies who are born before 33 weeks of gestation have double the risk of developing schizophrenia, the other focus of our proposal, and psychosis as adults, and that risk increases by almost 7-fold in our youngest babies. I worked in the NICU earlier this month and took care of a family with twins who were born in our youngest gestational age. One of them already has evidence of brain injury, a severe brain hemorrhage that I also study in my lab. This hemorrhage points to the central role of the vasculature in neural development, as it coordinates the metabolism between the blood and the brain amongst its other roles. This new field of vascular neuroscience is truly the frontier, both scientifically and therapeutically, because the vasculature, as Dr. Kornblum mentioned, is highly targetable. Now back to my patient, his parents are motivated to try everything to help this baby. And I was telling them about our study and the potential impact of dietary interventions on autism spectrum disorders and schizophrenia. They were enthusiastic and asked me when their son could be enrolled. I, of course, encouraged caution, but was inspired to advocate even more strongly for funding our proposal now. So this personal story about one baby is just the tip of the iceberg. In 2022, there were over 38,000 preterm births in California. That's over 40,000 California children per year who potentially could benefit from our discoveries, and the cause is urgent. Thank you for this opportunity to advocate on behalf of my patients who cannot speak for themselves.
Thank you very much, Dr. Crouch. Next up, we have Dr. Quadrado to be followed by Mr. Graglio. Dr. Quadrado, you have the floor.
Good morning, board members. I'm Giorgia Quadrato. I'm the PI on the proposal list for 16360. I'm an assistant professor of stem cell biology and regenerative medicine at the University of Southern California. So today I'm here representing a team of investigators from USC, Caltech, UCLA, and Children's Hospital Los Angeles. Thank you so much for the opportunity to explain why our proposal for using patient-derived brain organoids for early diagnosis and prognosis of intellectual disability should be urgently prioritized for funding. We know that intellectual disability affects between 2 to 3% of California's children, with a disproportionate impact of underrepresented minorities. Currently, there are no accurate methods to diagnose and monitor intellectual disability, so it's hard to track the progress of this disease and provide personalized care, especially for URM children who face barriers to getting health care. One of the main goals of our proposal is to use machine learning approaches to correlate brain organoid findings with clinical EEG data to discover biomarkers for intellectual disability. These biomarkers will change the way we diagnose and manage ID without needing lengthy clinical trials. In addition, we are proposing to establish new paradigms for neuromodulation that will potentially revolutionize the treatment of intellectual disability. We are delighted that we have brought together a team of top experts from various fields, providing fresh perspective on neuropsychiatric research. If this proposal isn't funded, we will miss the opportunity to attract these talents to this field. We are happy to report that the grant working group showed great enthusiasm for our proposal. In fact, it received unanimous support with 14 votes in favor and 0 against in 3 key categories, which are significance and impact, innovation, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some reviewers have expressed concern about using organoids to model brain network activity. However, opinions on this matter varied among reviewers. Nevertheless, organoids have consistently proven to be valuable in modeling neural network abnormalities, outperforming any other human-based cellular models. So overall, we feel this project is a much-needed investment in deepening our knowledge and expanding our toolkit for modeling brain network activity. It will also open doors to translational opportunities for a range of other neuropsychiatric disorders. Therefore, we strongly believe that now is really the time to invest in this research. And by funding our project, you are not just supporting a single study, and you are really propelling the entire field forward. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Thank you so much, Dr. Quadrato. Next up, we have Mr. Graglia to be followed by Dr. Samarsingh. Mr. Graglia, you have the floor.
Thank you very much for your time. Thank you to the reviewers and the board for hearing us out. My name is Michael Graglia. I'm the founder and managing director of the SYNGAP Research Fund, the National and Patient Advocacy Group for SYNGAP1. I've had the great pleasure of working closely with Dr. Quadrato for a couple of years, and I can testify to her incredible commitment to patients and exceptionally collaborative nature. As you know from reviewing her proposal, SYNGAP1 is the gene that they would start with as they tackle intellectual disability. And I want to emphasize for the committee what a perfect choice this is. And I want to express my confusion between the great scores that are available in the public notes and this split of 213 on a 1-2. Because as Dr. Quadrato mentioned, there seems to be strong enthusiasm, but let me focus on SYNGAP1. Per California's own information, there's over 600,000 kids with intellectual disability in California, people with intellectual disability in California. We don't know how many thousands of those have SYNGAP1, but I assure you this disease is radically underdiagnosed, and I want to explain why. I want to also note, if you look at Satterstrom et al. Or Fu et al., which are two of the biggest studies on autism genes, SYNGAP is either the 3rd or 4th most highly associated gene with autism. So when we're talking about autism, SYNGAP is right there at the table. I want to tell you a little bit about the path of disease, though, because this is critical. Our kids start with intellectual delays.
Yeah, can you help me?
Not begin seizing until
how do I see myself?
3. Whoever's on mom's iPad, please mute. Until they are 2 or 3, right? Then around 5, 6, 7, 8, their behaviors become exceptional. And many of our kids are caught only because of severe psychiatric and behavioral presentation, right? SYNGAP1 is down the middle. Indeed, it was first defined as MRD5, right? The primary phenotype was intellectual disability. But my point here is the behaviors of SYNGAP, and I can share study after study that validate this, are exceptionally challenging depending on whatever disease you're looking at. So it is a perfect fit for these Remind Awards. And I also want to emphasize, there was one line in the comments that struck me. In addition to a large fraction of patients with blah, 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 it will be difficult to establish distinct electrophysiological markers versus ID for epilepsy because these kids have seizures. That's wrong. With respect, whoever wrote that doesn't understand SYNGAP1. I can tell you right now, I have hundreds of patients who come to me having had an EEG, and they are told by neurologist after neurologist, you don't have seizures, but you've got some very strange EEG activity. So consistently, our patients present abnormal EEGs while they are experiencing ID before they have epilepsy. Dr. Quadrato, as a testament to her incredible work, has found a really strong model here. And I hope that upon her revision, her application is given serious consideration, because this work, these HHMI investigators.
Thank you so much, Mr. Graglia. Next, we have Dr. Samarsingh to be followed by Zoe. Dr. Samarsingh, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you to the board for this opportunity to discuss our grant. My name is Dr. Anmal Samarsingh. I'm a clinical epileptologist and a stem cell researcher at the David Geffen School of Medicine. And I am a co-investigator on the grant that was just discussed, 16360. And I want to address in my brief time a very specific point, which was just brought up about this grant, which I think makes it challenging to judge. but also innovative and very important. And that is the fact that this grant, compared to many others, not just in this particular funding mechanism, but outside of this, is focused on electrophysiology. And most folks who are writing grants that involve stem cells and organoids, or even evaluating them, are experts in stem cell biology, in neurodevelopmental disease, and cell development, but not in electrophysiology. And I think that makes it hard to judge this grant, and it has resulted in some contradictory reviewer comments, which I'll highlight, and I'll explain this. So, for example, one reviewer, and this goes to the heart of this grant, says, a reviewer has high enthusiasm for attempting to demonstrate an organoid activity human EEG link. And I'm paraphrasing. In general, the overall projects are based upon sound scientific rationale, and the approaches were based on robust preliminary data. And this is about the electrophysiology. Almost in the same breath, another reviewer writes, based on published literature, only 25% of ID patients show EEG abnormalities, incorrect. And hence, it'll be very difficult to establish direct electrophysiological markers for ID versus epilepsy. As a clinical epileptologist who sees patients and reads EEGs, and as was stated in the previous comments, this is not correct. The fact is that EEG abnormalities can be seen in neurodevelopmental disease, and patients who don't have any history of epilepsy will not get epilepsy, and certainly patients who don't have active seizures. And this is at the heart of this proposal. I think it's hard for some reviewers to understand this, and it's resulted in this kind of contradictory review, and the ones that I think pushed us to a 2 instead of a 1. But we can certainly address this. And in this grant, by the way, as a human observer or an EEG reader, we can certainly tell the difference between EEG from someone who's seizing, who has epileptiform discharges, versus an EEG of a patient who has intellectual disability based on other changes like slowing. But here we're proposing to use computational approaches like machine learning, like deep learning, to tease apart these differences, which is going to be much more sophisticated than what even a human observer can do. So this is just an opportunity to say that there's conflict in these reviews. We can address this. It's at the heart of the resistance of this proposal, but I think this is an incredible opportunity to do something that's particularly unique, and I hope we have at least a chance to address these reviews moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samar Singh. Next up, we have Zoe, to be followed by Dr. Mustafa Raji. Zoe, you have the floor.
Hi, thank you all for the opportunity to speak here. I'm here in support for Grant 360. My name is Zoe Bailey, and my firstborn, beautiful, adventurous, funny, brown-skinned 4-year-old daughter, Kaya, was diagnosed with SYNGAP1 related disorder about a year and a half ago on March 23rd, 2023. A day we'll never forget. Our life before that day is almost unrecognizable today. A day that introduced us to the underfunded and underrepresented world of disabilities, especially for families of color like ours. As a mother to my beautiful Black daughter, I knew the world would be different for her than her white peers. I was prepared as much as I could be for that. However, adding the reality that not only would our unequitable system not afford her opportunities due to her race, but now also based on her brain's ability to function. Our journey advocating for Kaya has been nothing short of heartbreaking. Kaya's intellectual disability and SYNGAP1 related disorder has altered the trajectory of our lives. As of now, since there is no treatment, she will need full-time care for her entire life. She is currently nonverbal, has extreme anger outbursts towards those closest to her, engages in self-injurious behaviors, and does not understand danger. Kaya's diagnosis was one that I now realize we were lucky to get so early on in her life. As Mike had mentioned before, she still has concerning EEGs, but she is not officially diagnosed with epilepsy, although it is clear there's intellectual disability. The diagnosis that we received was due to access to top medical care, 2 highly available, engaged, well-educated parents, and the access to time and resources, which we know can all be compromised for our communities of color. As a licensed clinical social worker with years of experience working in the child welfare system and supporting severely mentally ill adults secure housing, I am clear that families like mine, families of color, are disproportionately denied access and support needed to care for their children, and even more so, whose children are impaired and impacted by the cruel world of intellectual disability. Since we were afforded the gift of a diagnosis, I've become an active volunteer with SYNGAP Research Fund, the national patient advocacy group for SYNGAP1 related disorders based here in California. It is without question there are countless patients of color and of all populations that are undiagnosed with SYNGAP1 and other causes of intellectual disability. Increasing the number of those diagnosed with intellectual disability and funding research toward treatments would be an incredible step in the right direction. Dr. Quadrado's grant promises to better understand patients like Kaya, who are in desperate need of better medicines and therapies. Thank you all for your time, and I want to show you a picture of my daughter. I don't even know if you can see it, but there she is. And here she is again. Okay, thank you all again for your time and your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Next up, we have Dr. Mustafa Raji to be followed by Dr. Krikstein. Dr. Mustafa Raji, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, and I will be brief. My name is Mohammed Mustafa Raji. I'm a research scientist at the UC Santa Cruz Genomics Institute. I'm also a co-investigator in grant 17337, which is the one of the tied votes. I do want to mention a little bit about our proposal, which I think it's very relevant to the Remind call, because it's, I would probably say, one of the only, if not the only application that is going to propose an actual treatment that can be given to patients in the 4 years of the grant duration. So that, to me, it's a very, very important fact to discuss. The other thing I want to mention is that what I want to mention is that we need to be efficient. We need to actually get these treatments to the patients as soon as possible. I believe that having a 3 to 5 month review process, when this could be sorted at the pre-funding application review stage, could actually be more efficient investment of money and public funding, as well as taxpayer money specifically here. One more point I wanted to bring up is I also happen to be a co-investigator in the Data Coordination Center of the SciGene Consortium, which is the largest current NIH initiative for neuropsychiatric disorders using stem cell models. And I know the importance that there is in having the groups share common interests and share a lot of complementary collaborations. Bringing into this experience, I want to highlight the fact that Dr. Aparna Baduri not only is a young investigator who has started her lab less than 2 years ago, but also happened to have collaborated with most of the grants that are currently on tier 1. So the efficiency at getting this collaboration started will be immediate. Not only that, she also happens to be a co-investigator in one of the data generation centers, the SciGene Consortium, which means that we will also tap into the collaborations that happen outside the state of California, the state countrywide. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mustafa Raji. Next up, we have Dr. Krikstein to be followed by Dr. Christoph. Dr. Krikstein, you have the floor.
Yes, hi. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I should introduce myself as a neurologist and developmental neurobiologist, and I'm PI on the application number 16283. Now, ours is a quite different application from the others that have been discussed so far. As you all know, California is experiencing an epidemic of drug use right now, with relaxation of our public health policy on cannabis consumption, which has exposed actually more unborn babies to cannabis than ever before. There are over 19% of women in California who actively use marijuana during pregnancy. And that's even though population studies have repeatedly shown that marijuana use during pregnancy is associated with neuropsychiatric outcomes in later life. However, the public perception is that marijuana use during pregnancy is safe, and the existing population-associated data are considered weak, anecdotal, non-causal, and haven't been trusted. So the current evidence that we have is not strong enough to move that needle, and it hasn't changed public opinion or behavior. And we feel that it's extremely important to provide molecular and cellular evidence of the causal effects of marijuana use on fetal brain development. Our preliminary single-cell gene expression data suggests that in utero exposure, marijuana strongly affects neuron proliferation, axon growth, and a particular subset of interneurons that express cannabinoid receptors. And the affected genes are strongly related to autism, schizophrenia, and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So we feel that finding and defining the cellular and molecular consequences of cannabis exposure to the developing human brain can lead to actionable interventional solutions that will have a direct impact on public health policies. We're deeply committed in our proposals to community outreach initiatives, and we're actively collaborating with several community organizations, including the California Preterm Birth Initiative, San Francisco Department of Public Health, and the local American Indian community, which is the Lakota tribe. We're all part of the community engagement program that's assembled in our project. And the major critique of our proposal concerned a lack of innovation in our approach, despite the fact that our technologies in the proposal include single-cell transcriptomics and proteomics, spatial transcriptomics, and metabolomics, and they're all cutting-edge techniques that really have not been applied to this problem before. We feel in the end that there is urgency in determining the effects of marijuana use on the fetal brain. Moreover, we feel this is an application where stem cell technology can have an immediate healthcare benefit. We're happy to discuss the reviewers' concerns, and we hope that the board will reconsider our project. And in the final comment I want to make is, as was mentioned earlier in today's discussion, there could be funding for 2 of the Tier 2 projects with some slight rebudgeting of some of those grants. And I would urge the board to consider funding 2 of those. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kriegstein. Next, we have Dr. Christoph. Christoph, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Heather Christoph, and I'm a biochemist and a team member of the 16337 application with a minority report that was discussed earlier by some board members and some of my team members, Drs. Baduri, Kornblum, Crouch, and Mustafa Raji. I've spent the last 20 years studying how metabolism impacts health and disease at a mechanistic level. Metabolism is the process by which we digest nutrients from our diet to derive the energy and macromolecules we need to live. Dietary approaches to disease treatment have actually been used effectively in many areas of medicine, not only as a life-saving approach to treat patients with inborn errors of metabolism and to treat childhood epilepsy, as Dr. Kornblum earlier mentioned, but also to treat patients with autoimmune conditions such as Crohn's disease and gout. We now know that diets can influence the levels of neurotransmitters in the brain. So it makes good sense to examine whether and how diets might modify central nervous system disorders, such as autism and schizophrenia. This is an exciting new area of research that could lay the groundwork for a new way to treat neurodevelopmental and neuropsychiatric disorders through dietary interventions. Although some of our reviewers recognized the great innovation and potential significance of our study to benefit patients and families dealing with autism or schizophrenia, other reviewers were concerned about the correlative nature of some of our proposed experiments. And we agree that the neurometabolism field is still in its infancy, which is both a challenge and an opportunity. Studies such as ours will examine whether solid connections do exist between specific diets and autism and schizophrenia phenotypes, before then delving deeper into mechanism. Our proposed multidisciplinary study will lay the groundwork to examine mechanistic connections between specific diets, neurovascular metabolism, and autism or schizophrenia. If anything promising comes out of our study, we are well equipped to rapidly translate our findings to patients by conducting diet-based trials at UCLA. We hope that you reconsider the decision to only fund the top 5 and consider Dr. Baduri's proposal for a limited revision of our study. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christoph. That is it for hands raised.
Thank you. Thank you for the members of the public who took the time to comment and put their thoughts into such a logical and compelling format. I appreciate that. Before we proceed to a vote on the motion, are there any final comments from board members? Hearing none.
Anne-Marie has her hand.
Anne-Marie, you have your hand raised, I'm told.
Yeah, I finally find the way to do it.
There you are.
A comment and a question. So the comment goes to all the scientists, parents, clinicians who have had the courage and took the time to come and sort of defend their project. How much we appreciate all of that, the time, the courage, the way of thinking about it. And I want to assure on behalf of myself, and I'm pretty sure I'm speaking on behalf of other board members, that we are paying a lot of attention to the quality of the process when it comes to challenging proposals as such as the one that you have put in front of us. It's not easy for you to hear that. It's not easy for us to judge that, but that's why we have been appointed to this. And I want to applaud particularly the courage of parents to come in front of us and explain to us their situations. Having said that, I would in general think more in terms of the importance of fairness, more so than efficiency. Efficiency is important. I know the SERM team is efficient, but making the best judgment and the fairest one in my mind, the most important one. So that was for my comment. And my question goes to everyone, but usually, Gil, you're the recipient of all our questions. Could you tell us your thoughts about the proposal that was made, I think, by Dr. Badbury, if I'm correct, about a accelerated review process? I have a sense that you'll find it not applicable to the mission of the SERM, but I think it's just worth 2 minutes of discussion and your feedback on this one. Thank you. Or anyone else for that matter.
Sure, but I'm happy to respond. I just want to make sure I'm responding to the right thing. This was to the proposal of having the grants working group review only application 16337, but not the others.
Dr. Badbury would be the best one to express that. We're not going to reopen that to the floor, but there was a notion of limited accelerated review, which if this had merit, and I'm putting the if in capital letter here, we could decide not only to apply not to one, but to others. But yeah, I'll stop here.
Okay, so with, I mean, that is something that the Application Review Subcommittee, you know, could do. But again, our recommendation in the interest of being fair to all of the applications that we think have promise, that we would advise that all of the 9 applications that received a score of 2 get the opportunity to address the concerns of the panel and explain how they would improve their applications, and have the grants working group let us know whether they feel they've been adequately addressed or not.
I understand and I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Marie, to be followed by Fred Fisher.
Yeah, while I appreciate all of the enthusiasm for this particular proposal, we should not be creating new policy or changing policy on the fly as a reactive response to our interest in the work that's being proposed. We have a methodology for dealing with deficiencies in proposals that can be addressed within our current process relatively quickly. So I think we ought to move forward with the SERM team's recommendations, as well as the grant reviewers, that this proposal have the deficiencies addressed and come back for the opportunity to be fully funded. Otherwise, we will find ourselves time after time renegotiating our own policies when we think it suits us, which I don't think is an appropriate way to proceed, given our accountability to California taxpayers for a process that has integrity and consistency. That doesn't mean that the board could not convene a separate group to address situations like this and propose an alternative methodology. but it should not happen within the context of discussing a single proposal during an application review subcommittee meeting. This is not the place for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. I very much appreciate your comments. So seeing no other hands, I'm going to ask Scott to call the vote on the motion. Maybe he'd like to restate it.
The motion is to accept the recommendations of the CERN team to fund those in applications in Tier 1, to not fund those in Tier 3, and to allow resubmission of those in Tier 2. Process point for members Derone and Flowers. When you indicate your vote on the motion, if you would also add with the exception as to those applications with which you are in conflict, we'll be good to go. Maria Bonneville.
Yes.
Judy Chow.
Yes.
Anne-Marie Deliege.
Yes.
Isabel Derone.
Yes, with the exception of those for which I'm in conflict.
Thank you. Mark Fisher Colbury.
Yes.
Fred Fisher.
Yes.
Elena Flowers.
Yes, except those with which I have a conflict.
Thank you. David Higgins.
Yes.
Vito Imbassiani.
Yes.
Rich Lahara. Sorry, Rich, are you?
Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. Lauren Miller Rogan.
Yes.
Adriana Padilla.
Yes.
Joe Panetta.
Yes.
Marv Southard.
Yes.
And Kevin Zhu.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Before we move on to some general comments, I'm going to give the floor to our Vice President for Scientific Programs and Education. Rosa, are you on the line? There you are, Rosa Canet Aviles.
Thank you, Dr. Imbashani. Thank you, everybody, and especially the patient advocates that remind us of how important it is, the work that we do. But I wanted to give thanks to a few special people because this has been 3 years in the making, leading to today's votes and then the re-review. And I wanted to thank Dr. Chanlek Tan, who is a senior science officer in our team and has been actually instrumental in the development of this program and lots of consultations with a lot of the applicants. I also want to thank Dr. Jamie Byron, who has been supporting Dr. Chanlek Tan, and also Dr. Linda Nevin, who has been the review lead in the office of Dr. Gil Zambrano, the review office, and who has been collaborating as well. And the grants management team. I want to thank them as well because they have been working very hard in developing the applications, the AT team as well. So there's a lot of people that we want to thank. And also the grants management team together with the science team is going to be very busy in going through the pre-funding administrative review now. So just giving thanks to everyone that makes this possible. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rosa. I appreciate that.
Mark Fisher Colbury has his hand raised.
Mark, I see your hand. Hi.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to amplify the tremendous work that the CERN team has done to assemble this novel program with RemindL and RemindX. And a huge amount of effort's gone in behind this. And I think even from what you're hearing from the researchers who presented today, there's a critical need and a high degree of urgency around this type of activity. And this type of program is exemplifying the kinds of improvements that have been enabled with a huge amount of work by the CERN team to be able to accelerate the path-breaking kinds of research that can be accomplished. So we very much look forward for a continuation of this kind of effort, but wanted to acknowledge the staff and their role in coming up with these novel programs. So thank you.
Well, thanks so much. I don't think there's anyone left to thank, but I do want to commend here in the room, Scott and Claudette here make these, they're our unsung heroes in working out the background mechanics of this. I appreciate everything there. I'm gonna, before we end the meeting, this is a time for members of the public to comment on things that are not on the agenda or general comments on the process that we use for the Application Review Subcommittee.
Don't see any.
You don't see anything, okay. Then I'm going to thank you again, board members from wherever you are in the world, for joining this very important meeting today, and congratulations to launching the Remind program. Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.